People who have lived in dorms, what is your craziest dorm story? NSFW. A girl once invited me back to her room and I was severely inebriated. The first thing I did upon entering her room was pick up her laundry hamper, chock full of clothing, and throw it out the window. This turned out to be the ultimate pickup strategy because she instantly jumped onto me and we made sweet intoxicated love. Works every time. During the first week of college, someone left a used condom in one of the girls' showers. The RA lost her sheet and sent out a scathing email, maybe a little over the top. I mean, everyone on that floor was banging like bunnies by Christmas break with little regard for personal privacy. Of course I saved the email, my favorite excerpt. I have never had to deal with something this disgusting. And the fact that one or two of you seem to think it's appropriate not only to have sex in a public shower, but to leave your condom there really makes me wonder whether you all have the maturity to be living in away from your parents. I would suggest none of you have sex on my floor in a public area again. I have alerted all of the resident advisors in this building that if they ever come across this kind of lewd, irresponsible behavior on my floor, they are to wake me up, no matter what time of night. And I will make sure that your write-up is as embarrassing and painful as possible. Turns out it wasn't a used condom, but a condom that a girl on my floor had filled with conditioner as a joke. She's now my best friend. Edit. Clarity. We had a guy dress up as Gumby and scare people at night. On night someone tried to punch him and he said, "You can't hit Gumby, that's a hate crime." I once had a girl staying at my dorm, in my bed. At one point I got up to go to the communal bathroom. Came back and she was in my roommate's bed. He had literally picked her up out of my bed and moved her into his bed. It was incredibly uncomfortable for the girl and I. I'm hanging out in the room next door to mine with 3 other guys and we're playing FIFA. All of a sudden this kid comes in. The door was unlocked. We recognized him and knew that he lived down the hall, but nobody knew his name or anything about him. He reeked of alcohol. It was about 1 AM. Without saying a word, he walks over to the TV, whips out his big dick, and starts pissing on this box. I loved living in the dorms my freshman year of college. We all woke up one morning to fresh, big, steamy poo plopped in one of the stairwells. The building had 6 floors and everyone could smell it. Nobody knows who left it. I had a girl chasing after me with no pants on telling me to touch her cooch in exchange for some Hardee's fries. There are tons of good stories that you can get living in the dorms. I am currently living in the dorms and on the 5th floor every night for over a week someone would take a sheet in the trash room we had on each floor. They had floor meeting trying to figure out the culprit and yet the next morning there would still be another sheet in the trash room. They later found out it was an international student who was afraid of the toilet having never used one until she came to the US. I was in RA in college. While I was on call for the building one night, I heard some glass break. I walked out of my suite into the courtyard of the building. I saw 2 people running to exits, and one guy laying near a broken window. He was wheezing and bloody, with 2 chest wounds. I tried to keep him breathing while I called 911. Ambulance and police arrived, and he was taken to the hospital where he died of his wounds. The Krillers were caught in the following weeks. To my knowledge he was held over a drug deal gone bad. Quite a few, actually. There was the time when someone found a way to use the dorm's old deactivated intercom system and turned it into his own personal radio station, complete with anti-res life propaganda. There was the time when someone decided to microwave mouse in the floor's lounge, leading to the worst smell I have ever smelled. Or the time where the floor above us decided to all dress up in 80s workout gear and go for a run throughout the halls, complete with calisthenics and the elevator landing. Maybe the guy I lived next to who had throwing knives and liked to blow off steam by chucking them down the hall into the closet or at the end. I could probably keep going. Being in RA was interesting. I once got more than 6 hours of sleep. Okay. Now these stories are just getting unbelievable. So this one guy who lived on my floor was quite new to drinking. He had never had a sip in his life. That quickly changed when arriving at university. The second night we are there he has 2 Smirnoff Ices and he was plastered. 30 minutes later he is in his own room with the door wide open puking in his drawer thinking it is a garbage can. Being the courteous and thoughtful university students we are. We waited until he finally passed out and handcuffed his hand to his bed and drew close to 40 big digs all over his body. All of different proportions. It was a ducking mural of big digs. Anyways. Next morning the guy wakes up and calls one of us to come unlock him from the bed. He's laughing and examining all of the Pen 15 portraits on his body. He showered and continued to drink with us every weekend. He was always a little bit odd but props to him for being such a good sport. Woke up on a Monday morning at 8 AM. Tripped over a shopping cart that my drunk roommate with a broken wrist had pushed for about 3 kilometers during the night. We also lived on the 3rd floor with no elevator. How he did this I will never know. I can't stop laughing at the thought of a drunk person squinting in the dark at a shopping cart and thinking, I need this to himself. I took shrooms a few times during my freshman year of college while in the dorms. The first time I took them they kicked in hard at around 1 in the morning. I remember watching Alice in Wonderland and being convinced it was the worst thing that was ever created. To distract myself from watching the horrors of that movie I started playing with my phone charger. I wrapped it around my arm and tied it and started to feel powerful. I then tied my laptop charger to my other arm and my power increased. I proceeded to try to steal my 3 friends' chargers who were also on shrooms and I did get a couple and tied them to myself. One of my friends then proceeded to gather all the shoes he could find and we argued over whether chargers or shoes were more valuable and tried to make them into currency. After about an hour of that I got mad at the fact I didn't have enough cords and decided to go to my room and ask my roommate if so could borrow his. I have never seen someone as confused as he was when I woke him up with cords tied all over my body asking for more so I could gain more power. He said no so I respected that and only took the cord to our dorm phone and took the telephone. I then proceeded to pretend I was dating that telephone and talked to it for longer than I care to admit. Moral of the story, shrooms can be pretty damn fun. I was pretty aware of how stupid I was being the whole time but just didn't care. We had 4 guys in my freshman dorm in 2 sets of bunk beds. I was trying to get some sleep and the guy above me, number 1, was spooning with his girlfriend when one of my other roommates, number 2, ran in completely naked, jumped up to the top bunk, and started furiously dry humping number 1 and his girlfriend above me. Roommate number 3 just silently masturbated the whole time. Spent 2 years in the dorms during college. Followed by 2 additional years spent in the fraternity house. Every single shower I ever took over those 4 years was barefoot. My roommate did this. I asked him, aren't you afraid you'll get foot fungus? Nah man. I give people foot fungus. A straight guy chased me with an airsoft gun for flirting with him all the time. I ran into another gay guy's dorm room and tried to hide in the shower. The airsoft gun was surprisingly painful. Well, my hetero terminator found me, jumped in the shower and started trying to shoot me point blank. I just turned on the water and told him that this was, despite the rapidly escalating violence, probably 10x hotter than I was expecting. He just stood there, dripping wet, and stared at me as he realized what happened. Why are gays so tricky? I was in RA. Here's some quick TLDRs. Resident gets his first semester grades in January. Barricades himself in the room. Throws his laptop out the closed window. And lights the floor on fire. Sprinklers go off and ruins every single thing on the entire floor with about 1 foot of stale water. He didn't live there after that. Resident gets assaulted by a non-student and his friends at 3 AM. They keep him, his roommate, and a friend locked in the room for 2 hours. They leave him with a fractured jaw, black eyes, and blood literally sprayed everywhere. They get apprehended by police outside. They did this based on a false rumor resident had ducked his girl. All resident did was ask her if her roommate was single. Poop smeared all over the bathroom mirror. Stall doors. lockers, and floors. Residents expect me to clean it. Lol no. Crazy girl on all girls floor physically threatens roommate if she follows through on switching rooms with someone who can tolerate crazy. The entire floor takes shifts guarding her and help the girl move her stuff while crazy is at a class. Crazy eventually is told to GTFO or face enrollment issues due to violating the student code. Riot on the street outside of the dorm. Lockdown. Idiot orders pizza. Terrified pizza dude. I pay for the pizza and keep it. Gave a big tip. My dorm was split in two halves on each floor. Boys in one half and girls in the other. Someone in the first floor got absolutely wasted one night and puked in the shower instead of the toilet for some reason. He broke not only that bathroom, but also the two floors above us, both girls half. All the girls in the dorm were furious because they were forced to use one bathroom on the first floor for about a week. None of boys told them who the culprit was. One of my favorite nights in the dorm was when my roommate showed up very drunk. For some reason. Whenever he got drunk, he was very open to suggestions. For example, earlier in the evening he showed up and was wanting to make Kool-Aid. My friends and I confronted him as he stumbled through the door and up to the front of the room to pick it up. We asked him why he didn't bring any sugar as he was getting ready to leave. He looked at us confused and we kept badgering him about the sugar. Eventually we convince him and he takes the sugar with him. He takes it and leaves. About 5 minutes later, he shows up with a caretaker and they put the sugar back. His keeper leaves but as he stumbles toward the door, we look at him and ask him, if you're wearing a hat, you need the sugar. In his infinite wisdom, this made perfect sense and he grabbed the sugar again. Lo and behold he shows up about 5 minutes later with his keeper again. This time keeper man is angry. Tells my friends and I to stop. Some time passes and he comes back. Drunker than before. But no keeper this time. My friends and I, now enlightened to his suggestive state, decide that we should ask him to bring back a girl for each of us. 4 people total. He leaves and we get back to gaming. Surprisingly, about an hour later, he shows up with 3 equally as drunk girls and an apologetic look on his face. He proceeds to say that he was sorry he couldn't find another and then passes out on his bed. At this point, my friends and I now had 3 very drunk girls on our hands. The girls get super handsy and, being the polite gentlemen we were, rejected their advances and instead figured out where they lived and took them home. My roommate never came back drunk again. TLDR our roommate was open to illogical suggestions and would take orders when he was drunk. Showed up with 3 drunk girls at my friends and my request. Had to walk the drunk girls home. There was this guy who was loudly screwing some girl he picked up at the Unique Club under my window. So I filled a bucket full of water, emptied my ice cube tray in it and dumped it on them from out the window and yelled, "Do you ducking mind?" at them. People kept saying that every time that guy walked into the dining hall for about 2 weeks after that. First week at college. Long week but finally it's Friday. I finally get back from practice to my room, 13th floor, and sit down to relax. When all of a sudden the fire alarm goes off. Because of course it does. So I grab my stuff and prepare for the hike down 13 floors worth of stairs. As I leave my room, I see the door across the hall fly open. Out comes one of the girls from across the hall. Except it's pretty obvious she has been in the shower and has apparently forgotten to get dressed before leaving the building. Went to a small private college with only like 2,200 students. Had a roommate of mine play Edward Fortunes one night and get so blitzed that he decided to break his closet doors and put a huge dent in the drywall in our room. Next he thought it'd be fun to run around our entire dorm building 3 times screaming "the pen is blue." I think he watched Liar Liar that day. Did I mention that on his little midnight run he was only wearing boxers? Yeah, he didn't even have shoes on and paid a price for that decision the next morning. Well, after he was good and tired from his run he decided to profess his undying love for his crush. A girl in room 205. Unfortunately, he was off by a floor and went and laid in a bed in room 105. And this miscalculation meant that rather than laying in bed with his crush, he laid in bed next to the only openly gay guy in our dorm. That poor guy had to go get the Ra, who in turn got the road, who got him back to our room. The next day when he was sober, he had a meeting with the road, who said, "I don't even know where to start the paperwork, so as long as you fix the stuff in your room and swear not to do any of it again, I'll let you off with a warning." TL. Dr. Roommate got blitzed, wreaked havoc and got off scot-free. So, I lived in a small honors dorm for a couple years with only about 20 rooms. One day my sophomore year, I came back from class and there were a couple guys in suits standing outside one of the rooms down the hall. This was rather unusual, so I made sure to keep one eye out the door. My room was at the end of hallway, so I could see all the way to the other end. So as some of the people who lived in the room came back from classes, one of the suit wearing guys would take them aside, talk to them quietly for a minute and then escort them out. It was a few hours before any of them came back to tell us the story. Turns out one of the 4 people in that suite had been busted in a sting by the feds attempting to sell stolen firearms, and the guys in suits were ATF. TL. DR. Guy down the hall got busted for arms trafficking. Mine wasn't a typical dorm, it was more like a small apartment complex but meant just for students. Anyway, nothing too crazy, but I walked into the living room and my roommate was masturbating to a male UFC fight. I don't think he was gay or bisexual, but he quickly moved and put his hand up to his laptop when I walked in. He thought I didn't see. I did, lol. Oh boy. My time to shine. Back in high school, there was this one kid. We'll call him Jake. Jake was a freshman, and he had a roommate named Mike. To say Mike and Jake didn't get along would be an understatement. But the worst problem they had was a recurring problem with Jake. Jake could not keep his hands out of his pants, and he frequently jerked off while Mike was still awake. Naturally, Mike would yell at him, to which Jake always responded, "AWW man." After a very long discussion, Mike finally got Jake to stop jerking off in front of him, and things were peaceful for a while. Until one day, Mike has a break from classes. He walks into the room, throws his stuff on his bed, and becomes aware of a slight creaking. He discerns that the noise is coming from a nearby closet. He throws the closet open, and there's Jake, rolled into a ball and jerking off upside down into a pile of t-shirts. The best part? It wasn't Jake's closet.